Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're taking a look at Completely Unfathomable. This is a D&D adventure for old school D&D generally by Jason Schultes, and it is a compilation of two separate adventures that are connected. So the first adventure is Operation Unfathomable, which is a weird underworld dungeon crawl, and the second one is the Odious Uplands, which is a sandbox region connected to this initial adventure. You can run them separately, you can combine them together, there's lots of different ways to remix it. I'll tell you right at the outset that this is one of the most entertaining books that I have read for D&D in a long time. It is definitely what you would call a gonzo adventure, at least that's what I would call it, in the sense that it is not super concerned with a very detailed setting that is very serious and all the parts are very thoroughly explained. It's an adventure that takes a lot of inspiration from the early days of D&D, when it was very much a kitchen sink kind of setting. You would have fantasy and sci-fi mixed together, a lot of inspiration from pulp paperbacks and TV serials, and just whatever you happen to be reading that week mixed together and thrown into a big adventure. The goal of a gonzo adventure like this is really to provide tons of variation in the kinds of experiences that the players have, because you can throw anything at them and it's going to fit somehow within the setting. It's all about entertainment and giving the players a ton of interactivity while amusing them the whole time. I chuckled to myself a lot while reading this, just because there's so many great little jokes and just very vivid, entertaining descriptions that come from one of the best writers in the business, and that's Jason Schultes. I've talked before about how one of my favorite supplements for old school D&D is the Dungeon Dozen right here. I think his blog, The Dungeon Dozen, is still available out there, and it's just packed with these great D12 random tables that are not supposed to cover everything. They're often very specific, but they are full of flavor and with ideas that you would never have thought of. Don't believe me? Well, let's take a look inside. But first, a quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Down Among the Dead, the new expansion for the Pirate Borg RPG, live on Kickstarter right now. Down Among the Dead adds a huge amount of new material to your game, including 3 new adventures, modular rule sets, and location generators. But that's not all. The Kickstarter is also funding the supplement Cabin Fever, the Pirate Borg starter set, a GM screen, a resin dice set, battle maps, and lots more. If you enjoy Morkborg or Pirate Borg, this is definitely a Kickstarter to jump in on. Links are down in the description below. All right, so what do you get inside Completely Unfathomable? The first thing you get is Operation Unfathomable. Oh, by the way, this is the edition for Swords and Wizardry, which is kind of the OD&D version of the game. There's also a Dungeon Crawl Classics version of it, if you prefer that setting. This is a big hardbound book, print on demand, printed from DriveThruRPG, so it's not stitch bound, unfortunately, although it has fantastic art. Look at this stuff. The book is absolutely jam-packed with art on almost every single page by some of the best artists in the old school D&D business. It is around 278 or 79 or so pages long, although quite a bit of that is spells, monsters, and supplemental stuff at the back. I think the adventures themselves stop at around 210. The author ran a very long campaign set within this world, and most of the characters died because it's an OD&D game. It's very deadly, but there's only one character that survived the entire campaign, Bardolph the Beer Hound, and he pops up throughout the book and gives his commentary on the stuff that you're reading, which I think is absolutely charming. Now, the general gist of Operation Unfathomable is that the local sorcerer king had a whole bunch of sons, and one of his sons has stolen his father's magic item, the Null Rod, which can nullify magic. He's run away with it and has escaped into the underworld, and you are being press-ganged into going down after him and grabbing it. This started off as a convention module and has been greatly expanded since then. We got plenty of rumors and helpful hints to start you out, like Shagath Ka, the Worm Sultan, lives down there. Are you insane? Godlings of the underworld can kill you with a thought, enslave with a gesture, destroy minds with a word. That one is actually true. The adventure is very deadly, and he is at pains to make sure you understand that if you're especially a level 1 character, you can die almost instantly with a lot of these encounters. So you need to be very careful. This is more like a stealth and diplomacy mission. If you want to go loud and start hacking things, you can, but it is not designed for any kind of balance whatsoever. To help offset that, though, he gives you lots of information and lots of help. For example, here is a little map that you can just hand out to your players. There are some things that are accurate here and some things that are not, but it gives you a good idea of where you probably should be going, so you're not wandering around completely aimlessly. Also, there was lots of magical artifacts that you can pick up that are really powerful and are totally out of scale for what a normal first level party would have. All of that is intentional. Even as you're heading down, he recommends that you just hand out to the players a bunch of magic items like Ancient Charms versus Chaos, Stone Cloaks, the Battle Axe of Spell Cleaving that can chop spells in half, and a dozen each red and blue anti-chaos pills. The way that this setting works is that chaos is a real force. It's more like radiation. At the center of the earth is raw chaos, and that's why anything is possible down there. And as you get closer to the surface, the forces of law take over and organize that chaos into a more rational form. So it's a lot like radiation. If you get near chaos, you will feel it and you can start mutating. These pills help ward off that effect. The ambient lighting of the underworld is kind of a soft glow from a lot of bioluminescent stuff, so you don't have to worry too much about torches, which is good because you might be down there for quite a long time. There are plenty of different factions down here, which is always good because you can manipulate them. You have Shagath Ka, the Worm Sultan, and his cult. You have the Cult of Null, Science Fungoids, the Grey Dwarf Insurgency, then Thrantrix, the Ineffable, and other stuff. All sorts of weird things. Much of the excitement and variation down here comes from this master event table. So you can roll on here periodically. It says a 1 to 2 on a d6, so of course that can vary depending on where you are. You roll on this d12 table, and perhaps if you get Underworld Phenomena, you would go over here, roll on this again, and then go to page 22, or go to the relevant page to figure out more about what that event is. You might also meet some competing parties and Underworld Travelers, or Wandering Horrors. Each of these has a nice big write-up. You might meet Cave Lightning or a Mutagenic Cloud, a Sorcerer's Expedition. There's a lot of hilarious NPCs that you will run into. For example, Professor Zambon Gormontine, the Robot Master. So he's secretly a robot from the future that has gone back in time to help you to make sure that you get the Null Rod back, because in doing so, this will bring about the robot apocalypse thousands of years from now. And there's also Dr. Ephraim Therontius, who is a bear from that same science fiction future who has come back to try and stop this guy. You might meet a gray humanoid wedding party, Null Priest with two-headed ape mummy bodyguard, terrified woolly Neanderthal on a solo spirit quest. Each of these is so flavorful and so fleshed out. I absolutely love it. It's not super detailed, but the details he gives you makes it stick in your head and makes you want to run it. Also, of course, the art is fantastic. Most of it is done by Jason Schultes, and it allows you to give a picture to your player immediately of what they see. There's Utherion, an ape myrmidon from a parallel universe where ape society has developed many parallels to Earth's ancient Greece, or an underworld ranger patrol, like these Flash Gordon types from another dimension, the blind antlermen. It's all just so good. Segmented giants, worm priests and entourage, some wandering horrors. Here we go. Herc and Kurg, twin princes of the Magmen. Traveling on diplomatic business further north, these 18-foot-tall siblings have no time for amusing diversions, such as slaughtering parties of first-level characters. However, their very proximity is a danger, with radiating body heat inflicting 1d6 damage to the lungs and exposed skin of anything passing within 10 feet of the creatures. They can be heard approaching unless the adventurers are occupied by something like a noisy battle, because of their thunderous footfalls and buoyant conversation regarding social affairs at the molten center of the world. A lot of the NPCs also come with sample dialogue, which is great, so you immediately have things that they're saying to get you in the right headspace. For example, I, for one, wish the Worm Brothers would just go ahead and devour one another and get it over with. I find all the jockeying for position and status distasteful in the extreme. Did you see that last graven image? Appalling. Thrantrix the Ineffable. This is one of the little godlings. The chaos of the center of the world throws up these horrible little god creatures every once in a while who have these megalomaniac speeches that they're always giving, with plenty of examples for you to start screaming at your players as they approach it. Here's the whole map of the underworld zone that you're going to be exploring. As you see, it extends off in all sorts of directions, so you can easily expand this or add it to your own underworld or underdark area. You start down here, and it's labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. going around the map. At first, I was a bit worried that how are the players going to get where they need to go? Are they going to be able to find all the clues to track down the Null Rod? And yes, there's plenty of evidence and clues that are given throughout the adventure, especially with that early map that you're recommended to give out. But there's also just a trail of carnage from the original party that the prince took down here with the Null Rod that you can track that's going to help you find a lot of the interesting material. It's very windy, it's very interconnected, so there's lots of different ways that you can travel and different orders that you can do things in, plenty of different approaches that you can take. Some of the features you might encounter include beetle ghosts, bottomless pits, which is a really great little feature because there are so many things in this dungeon that are super dangerous. Having a way that you could, in theory, just knock something down a bottomless pit is a great way to get players thinking about tactics. Next up, we have encounter areas, which give you details on all the major areas on the map. And despite having lots of fantastic ideas and it's being packed with interactivity and just fun things to describe to players, my main complaint would be that it's written in a way that's similar to the way that a lot of OSR stuff was written maybe 10 years ago, in that it's in a big block of text. It's not so bad with some of these rooms, but on some of the later ones, it can go a page or more of this stuff. That can make it tricky to explain to players on the fly. You have to read the whole thing and kind of figure out in your head what order to tell them things and what things are hidden, so you shouldn't mention, and what things are obvious, so it should be mentioned first, and stuff like that. The main reason for this, though, is that a lot of this text, a lot of this adventure was written 7 or 8 years ago. I kickstarted this almost 7 years ago, and it has only just arrived. There was a lot of delays. To be fair, Completely Unfathomable, or rather Operation Unfathomable, the very first adventure, did come out some years ago, but this compilation only reached me just now, and I didn't want to read it until I got the whole thing. So there is kind of that early OSR feel to the way that things are described. But there's also so much fun and imagination built into it that I can't help but forgive it. Random tables are everywhere to make things more strange and exciting than you were expecting. There is a random table of viewable dimensions that you can see through a dimensional viewer in the Beetle Science Center. There is a science fungoid experimental team, because there's these, myconid mushroom people who go around and they have this desire to experiment on humans. And they're not necessarily malicious. Well, maybe they're a little malicious, but they're very friendly. They want you to sign a waiver and do some experiments for them. Someone left their flying saucer running. Those time travelers from the future, they left their flying saucer here. You want to commandeer it and teleport it back to the future? Now you're in a whole nother dimension, and as he says, you're now on your own, but that could open up whole new vistas. A toll bridge for some bat-winged dwarves. A mini dungeon, the local franchise Temple of Null, which is one of the main cults that live in the underworld and is kind of taking over everything. One of the great things about the minions in this cult, if you're just a low-level mook, is you get your head chopped off voluntarily, and they replace it with an antenna, which I love, because not only is it a really funny image, it immediately communicates to the players exactly how this works. If they're being attacked by a guy with an antenna for a head, you know that he's being remote controlled from somewhere else just by looking at him. We have lots of new characters, NPCs inside this dungeon that you can interact with if you just want to go the social route. We have the Worm Sultan himself and his son, Shagang, something like that. Again, very powerful characters. These are like level 21 or hit dice 21 type characters. They're going to obliterate you if you just run in and try and hack at them. You're going to need to get creative if you want to interact with them at all. So that was our first part, Operation Unfathomable. Next, we have the Odious Uplands, which is substantially larger. I think it's about twice the size in terms of page count as Operation Unfathomable. And it goes into describing this huge open world zone that you can travel once you come out of the underworld and you want to just wander around and see what's going on the surface. The idea here is that this whole zone was buried under a glacier until fairly recently, maybe a few decades ago. Then for some reason, those glaciers moved off and melted, swamping all of the areas downhill from there. This has displaced a lot of people who have traveled up into Upper Macedonia in order to explore this new region, dig out all of the new resources and magic and treasure up there, and so it's become a kind of mecca for adventurers. Whole bunch of different ideas of ways you can start off this campaign as to why the players are there. If they have done the first adventure, Operation Unfathomable, the recommendation is that they're actually going to be hunted by the Imperial forces that sent them down. These people just want the null rod back, and they want no loose ends about anyone who knew about this whole incident, because it could be very embarrassing, I would assume, to the Sorcerer King who the null rod was stolen from. So you're going to have to either deal with that, or you can ignore that if you want players to get right into overworld adventure. Some of the factions on the surface include Fort Enterprise, which is going to be your base of operations if you want to go that route. There's a barbarian encampment nearby, kind of a whole bunch of Conans. The Imperial operatives sent from the south to try and get the null rod back, and they want to start taking control of the region as well. The woolly Neanderthals, who are as close to the good guys as you're going to get in this setting. Saber-toothed apes, who are just dangerous apes that are going to chew you up. Frost giant refugees, some of the forces of Null from the cults down below is now slowly moving up onto the surface. The science fungoids are back, and the extinct man-ape culture, although maybe not entirely extinct. It starts off describing Fort Enterprise, your base of operations, with all of the great NPCs that you're going to meet there. And as usual, these are just so rich and fun to read and to play. Governor Crowfax is basically like an old Conan the Barbarian that has settled down in the north running this little fortress and is gotten into a little bit of trouble with the Empire in the south. He's great in combat, a solid commander, and hopeless with money, heavily in tax debt with the imperial government. Who wants him dead? His ex-wife, a spurned lover, adult child of a former girlfriend, disgruntled ex-henchmen, several Murrian construction materials, and arms purveyors. Or there's Gads, who is his manservant. I would basically run him like Jeeves from P.G. Wodehouse. So some sampled dialogue. I apologize for appearing out of sorts. It is unforgivable, but I was momentarily overwhelmed by your sorcerer's choice of headgear. Galendigrius, who is the wizard that's in the service of Crowfax. Thrux the Gatemaster. Glean, proprietor of Glean's Exchange, because of course you got to have someone to trade with. Grieg, woolly Neanderthal ambassador. Countess Plume, imperial overseer. And yes, she is a citizen lich, because that is a thing in this setting that you can have not necessarily evil liches. They're just, they're immortal wizards, and they just live in society, and there's a lot of advantages to that. You have Chinchko, champion of Myrrh, and Shuplapla, the slugman trader. What does he say? So, Homo sapiens, have you sampled the jolly, flavorless lichen ale? I ask that you take 5 minutes to fill out this simple survey. Oh, sorry, can you read and write? There's a whole bunch of sorcerers hanging out in this fortress as well. Each of them has unique personality, unique spells, and unique goals in the setting, many of which are at odds with one another. So you ally with one of them, that could make an enemy of one of the others. There's a bishop at the Universal Temple of Law. There's a local vampire that you can hang out with. There's a number of vampires kind of scattered around the setting. They typically don't hide the fact that they're a vampire all that much. Here's a map of Fort Enterprise itself. Lots of different tent town denizens outside for you to hang out with. There is a monster sign telling you the monster alert level, white, yellow, orange, or red, because every once in a while, this giant King Kong monster from the extinct man-ape civilization will get really annoyed and just charge the fortress and cause havoc until you drive him off. In the center of the fort is the Tree of Jobs, full of lots of different expeditions that you can go on, along with the different rewards that they're going to give you. You can go visit the Wizard's Dormitory, the Barracks, the Flop House, public baths, the Beer Garden, the Temple of Law, the Imperial Encampment, the Stockade. Plenty of rumors so you can figure out what's going on in the nearby area, and lots of encounters. There is, I think, 4 of these D20 random tables, each of which is for day or for night and inside or outside of the fort. Here is our map of Stonespear Province, our map of the odious uplands. Now, this is the Game Master's version of it. Near the back of the book, there is a version of it for players that has a lot of these labels removed. And you can have little kids outside of the fort handing these out to incoming adventurers. You want to give them information so they have something to go off of. So they're not just heading out in a random direction. They can pick an objective and go towards it. The main areas are the Crab Forest, the Dominion of the Mammoth King, Underworld Incursion, Mount Impossible, which has this big donut on top, because there is a Chaos Aurora up in the sky at all times. And twice a year, it snakes its way through this donut, charging a device inside. There's the Frost Giant Forest, the Grassy Plain, Coloco's Path, that's the big King Kong type ape. He travels along this route on his daily routine. So depending on where you are on the map, you might run into him. There's a Fossil Forest, Kraken Lake, and Fort Enterprise over here. One thing that you'll notice is that there are no hexes on this map, and there really aren't any paths either, so it's not really a path crawl or a hex crawl, it's just a map. This version uses the Swords and Wizardry travel system. So what that means is you're just going to use 1 inch equals 12 miles. You can get out a ruler if you want to figure out how far you can go. This works perfectly well, but I think it would have been very nice to have at least a hex grid overlaid on this map for people who do more of a hex crawl style. Now, if you have the digital file of this, you can easily do that yourself, but it would have been nice to have that come with it. You'll notice scattered around the map are a bunch of these kind of standard symbols like these skulls or bones or like a saber-toothed monkey right there. And those will represent things that you can encounter if you get close to that area. So this is just dead adventurers. Again, tons of random tables for generating what killed them, any scavengers that are nearby, what's loot that was on their body. Plenty of weird magic items over here. This book is very heavy on magic items and giving players weird tools to use. Fossil sites, because a lot of this is about gathering treasure in the form of rare dinosaur fossils, which I think is really fun. Fungal blooms, saber-tooth ape nesting sites. These guys are really nasty. And then we have our main areas of interest broken into these different regions. So we have Kraken Lake and environs. Lots of encounters here. Western shoreline, the protected woodlands, any kind of small areas that you can investigate or creatures that you can encounter. Stone Spear River, same deal. Van Syrian's Doorway. So again, one of these vampires that are scattered around the map that you can run into. The party camp of barbarian heroes. I love these guys. It's just a bunch of Conans hanging out in a camp, getting ready to defeat the local godling. And you can hang out with them. Maybe you can recruit them. They're, more or less good. They're very noble, at least. They want to defeat evil and chaos in the region. I love that there's barbarian reactions down here, so you know how to impress a barbarian or how to irritate them. For example, you can swagger and bluster, backed up by awesome ass-kicking skills, or offer gifts of booze. And to irritate them, you might plead for help, beg for mercy, they really hate that, or any failure to show due respect, or make citations from fancy books and knowledge. Each of them is funny, distinctive, slightly over the top, and designed to really stick in players' heads. Oh, we have ape country over here. So lots of saber-toothed apes who are kind of the main villains that you're going to be running into on a day-to-day basis. Just charging at you, slashing at you, trying to sink their huge teeth into you. There's a number of mini dungeons scattered throughout as well. Like this one is the Buried Tower of Enlightenment. This one's being explored by the itinerant sorcerer Galaria and her gang of cutthroats. I love how their sample dialogue reveals their personality. Perhaps you've met my father. Yes, the one with the beehive on his head. We could share the burden and split the cash. Or we could kill each other. It's all the same to me. I have a ransom. Lots of money. Don't kill me. I love the contradiction there. The next section is the Crab Forest. You can meet this man-ape tattooist who will tattoo things on your body, causing horrendous pain, but then this will give you information about the setting. For example, he might tattoo a pictorial map of the Dominion of the Mammoth King featuring the exact location of Cephalax's Bower. You might meet the Ant City and Her Majesty, the Queen of Ants itself, fight the Titanoswine and get Null's Cleaver, connected back to the Cult of Null, because all this stuff is interconnected throughout the adventure. The Dominion of the Mammoth King itself. There's the Mammoth King. Look at that guy. He's a king attached to a mammoth body. It's about what you would expect. Another mini dungeon, menagerie facility of the man-apes, where you might meet a local mini god, Cephalax himself. Look at this horrible guy. There's also more than one place on the overworld map that connects down to the underworld, especially if you want to expand that underworld map from Operation Unfathomable and have kind of this above and below campaign going on. Here's a science fungoid surface incursion research facility featuring lots of these beheaded soldiers of Null, saber-toothed ape clan's fungal remains, Mount Impossible itself, this huge mountain with one of the most powerful artifacts in the entire setting right there at the top, if you can get there. There's a small observation station near the top controlled by the Batwing Dwarves who require some tolls in order to not drop rocks on you as you try to climb. So you can pay that toll or you can try and fight them while you're climbing. Sounds like a dangerous proposition. Another little mini dungeon, the Man-Ape Temple at the very top, along with these two magic artifacts. Although you'll probably only be able to get access to them if you defeat Zoltek, the spider thing of Mount Impossible. Over here we have the Chaos Battery, which has absorbed some of the raw chaos it's gotten from the Aurora, the Chaos Aurora surrounding the mountains. And it's providing power, at least a little bit of power, to the Chaos Converter over here, which takes that raw chaos and can channel it into, well, virtually any form that a sorcerer might imagine. Effectively, it has the power of almost a wish spell, although a wizard might have to do a lot of research to figure out how to actually make it work. We have Koloko, our King Kong equivalent right here, along with his behavioral cycle, because he does things in a very particular order every single day. For example, in mid-afternoon, he feasts upon some swamp cabbage, then he raids the Vineyard of the Night for a handful of black grapes, then he heads north at top speed, then during dusk he has ritual ablutions in the Stone Spear River, rapids near Frost Giant Forest. He goes through this whole schedule, and if you meet him and disrupt his schedule at all, he goes berserk and runs off to attack Fort Enterprise. I love this because it gives players the ability to plan. Once you know what the ape is doing and what his schedule is and where he's going to be, you can find ways to work that to your advantage, and you can figure that out by observing him. There's the Frost Giant Forest, where you can meet the Frost Giant faction and perhaps try and make allies with them. They're not necessarily good guys. Here's their hovel, although of course it is a Frost Giant hovel, so it is way bigger than a typical hovel for humans. I love a good adventure where everything is not the right size, because it forces you to really think about your environment in new ways. Travel across a grassy plain, plenty of encounters here. Meet the woolly Neanderthals, who are a tribe of mostly peaceful Neanderthals, bigger than humans, but can be quite deadly in a fight if you find a reason to become allies with them and help them against their enemies. There's some psychoactive stone here where if you press it against your forehead and you keep it there for a long time, you gain a little bit of ESP and telepathy. And if you hold it there for a very long time, like perhaps you put it inside your helmet, like this Neanderthal does, it becomes stronger and stronger. Like she can shift around something the size of a giant stone, like a dolmen, with her mind, which makes her incredibly dangerous. The fossil forest here in the region. So this was a giant humanoid. This is his skeleton that has fallen to Earth after trying to fight a godling somewhere in outer space. But this has resulted in the colossal shadow. After years of low-level chaos exposure, the colossal spaceman's fossilized bones yielded the deceased titan's poorly realized apparition, half aware and bound locally by a seemingly unbreakable spiritual tether. The ghost titan's dim outline is sometimes visible against the night sky, illuminated by the chaos aurora, and is otherwise experienced as a undefinable darkness or grim presence. Reminds me a little bit of the god at the end of Princess Mononoke. Here's a fun location to discover, the Inn Invisible. It's an invisible inn that exists both in this location and also in 1974 Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. This bed and breakfast in Wisconsin discovered one day that adventurers from another dimension were walking through their door thinking that they were at an inn, and they decided to just roll with it. A great place to relax, recuperate. You can set it up as your new base of operations if you don't like hanging out at Fort Enterprise. Meet some of the guests hanging out at the bed and breakfast. Galung's Arboreal Laboratory. So this is a local evil sorcerer who is trying to take control of the giant shadow and use it to, of course, take over the world. Galung has built a soul cannon, which is this giant anti-aircraft gun type cannon that's going to fire a psychoactive stone bullet directly into the shadow, which will, he hopes, charm it and bring it under his control. You can go to an archaeological dig and learn a little bit about the ancient beetle civilization that once ruled the world. And there's the Vineyard of the Night, ruled by another vampire who really just wants to drink your blood. At the back, we have appendixes, including history lessons, if you want to get into the often very amusing and entertaining backstory of this world. It's not really necessary to play, but I thought it was a lot of fun and puts a lot of things in context in terms of how all these factions got here, how the world is set up the way it is, just in case, players have questions about that sort of thing. There's a number of pre-generated characters as well, so players can get a full-on portrait of their character with all of the personality and the armor and the weapons and stuff ready to go for them, which I think a lot of players would really like, especially if you're doing a one-shot. It could be fun just to slap one of these down in front of them and be like, "You are Crodoc of the Standing Stones. You're a fighting Neanderthal." What's funny is after the first 10 of these, which are all level 1 characters, there is 4 level 4 characters, which are all upgraded versions of the level 1 characters, but you can see how they've changed over time, how their ideals may have shifted, and how they've become worn down by the horrible things that they've experienced. A little appendix for what happens when your character dies and to explain how your new character has suddenly shown up. Like maybe they are formerly held under mind control by a chaos godling, now broken free and slowly recovering their original personality. A big appendix for monsters, treasures, and spells. Usually when a monster comes up in an adventure, then it has the stat block, but if you want more information about them, then you can go to the back and read about that. The Ooze Eater, the Bald Raven, Segmented Giants, Bluff Spiders. So much great imagination in this thing. It's just fun to flip through. Equipment and treasures. There's lots of these, as I said, throughout the adventure. This just helps flesh them out a little bit. So if you forget what a item does when they picked it up, you can go back and refer to it. And some new spells, some new playable species and classes like Underworld Otters or the Woolly Neanderthal. You want to be a Citizen Lich? That's right, you can do that. The Underworld Ranger class. There's some little comics at the back kind of showing what a adventure through the Underworld would look like. I thought these were really fun, mostly just because I enjoy the art so much. And you get a sense of the kind of tone that the author is going for. And some maps and handouts. Some for handing out the map of the Operation Unfathomable to your players. You can use that one right there. Here's a portion of the Underworld that expands beyond the Underworld section that the first adventure is in, which I think is just that area over here. But again, it's a little bit loose. You're going to have to flesh it out yourself. Really nice character sheet done by, looks like Skull Fungus. Here's the player map for the overworld region. And that's about it. So that is Operation Unfathomable and the Odious Uplands. This is one of the most fun, entertaining, and beautiful books that I've read in a very long time. I have some quibbles about the usability, especially in the first adventure, but I think a lot of that is resolved by the time you get to the Odious Uplands, which I believe was written later, and so is just better organized and easier to parse. I think it really is a testament to how fun a kitchen sink gonzo style adventure can be. Your setting doesn't need to be really serious. You can just take all of the things that you think are entertaining and fun and smash them together and see what the players do with it. I had a blast reading it. If you want to pick it up for yourself, you can get it in PDF or in print form at the links down in the description below. And remember that the Knave Adventure Jam is still going on right now, so there's still time to jump in the fun and create your own adventure and get that published and possibly featured here on Questing Beast. I'll put links to that in the description below as well. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.